This video is sponsored by Skillshare. So we are wrapping up our final few days in Colorado. Those of you who follow me on Instagram probably already know because I've been posting a bunch of photos. A few years ago, I did a video similar to this one where I showed you the gear that I took with me when we traveled throughout Europe. If you guys will remember, in that video, I took my Sony a6000 and my Sony 35mm f1.8, which at that point in time was my favorite lens of choice. What I have here is what I took on this trip in 2020, and it's a little bit different because my bag is a little bit bigger. So this is a Sony branded bag. I'll link it down below. I don't think it's very expensive. I think it's around $20. This bag is pretty decent. You can fit quite a bit of stuff in here. It's almost too big for what I'm using it for. You can throw in some extra lenses and batteries and accessories, which I haven't done. I have a total of 5 items in this bag with me on this trip. The first thing is a battery charger. You guys know you need battery chargers because the batteries on these cameras unfortunately don't last very, very long. Item number 2 is a pair of batteries. So I have one in the camera body, and I always pack an extra camera battery just because if I don't have enough time to charge it at the hotel or wherever we're staying, I want to have a backup just in case. Item number 3 is an SD card. Not very exciting, but it is there. I've only packed one, I believe, and my wife has one on her vlogging camera, but that's a separate thing. This is a SanDisk Extreme Pro. I tend to like these a lot, and they're relatively inexpensive in comparison to some other SD cards out there. Items 4 and 5 are the actual camera and the lens itself. Now, with me today, what I've packed on this trip is probably going to be surprising, but the A6100. The reason that might be surprising is because it's the cheapest APS-C model that's recent. So this was released in, I think, October, November of last year. So it has the newer color science. Everything that we know and love about the A6400 and even the A6600 is packed into this tiny little camera body. It's not weather sealed, but I knew that the weather was probably going to be just fine in Colorado, and it has been. We really haven't seen any sort of rain or snow whatsoever. Now, the reason that I really like the A6100 is it's an inexpensive camera body, and there's something to say about carrying around a camera body that you know, if you drop it somewhere, if you lose it, if it gets stolen, it's only going to cost you between $500–600 to replace versus $1,200 on my A6600. So I tend to keep my A6600 at home, and when I look back and I look at all the photos that I've taken, particularly in 2020, I would say that 85% of them most likely were taken with the A6100. Ultimately, this camera body for photography is just as good as the A6400, just as good as the A6600. It's just missing the weather sealing and a couple of those key video features. For those of you who shoot video, you might want to look at those as alternatives. The A6100, I think, is a great value at the current market price. As long as you buy it at the right time. I made a video about it because if you're not careful, you could spend $750 on this camera body, and at that point, it is a little bit questionable as to whether or not it is worth it. Now, before I talk about the lens that I took with me on this trip, let's talk about today's video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creatives and curious people. You can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in the world of creativity. They offer classes in graphic design, photography, videography, creative writing, animation, basically anything and everything that is creative, you can probably find on Skillshare. Earlier this morning, yes, even on vacation, I had some extra downtime. I was listening to a class from Rand Fishkin titled Introduction to SEO, Tactics and Strategy for Entrepreneurs. This class was very hands-on and talked about a lot of great ideas that I'd never really thought about, like building a website around input from surveys. I mean, who would have thought? Simple idea, but that's all it takes sometimes. And that's why I really like Skillshare. They're centered around learning, there are no ads, and they're constantly adding new great classes so you can continue to get motivated and learn new things. And with an annual subscription, it comes in at less than $10 per month, which is extremely affordable, especially if you compare it to in-person classes or attending seminars. For a limited time, if you use the link down in the description below, you will get a free trial of premium Skillshare membership. So definitely check that down below. Now let's talk about the lens that I have with me on this trip. Those of you who have watched this channel for any length of time probably already know that I'm a big fan of prime lenses, in particular the Sigma Trio. Currently the Sigma 16, Sigma 30, and the Sigma 56, all f1.4, are by far my 3 favorite lenses and the lenses that I recommend to most people out there. But I didn't take any Sigma lenses with me on this trip, and that's a little bit sad, but not so sad because I know that this 16-55 G lens is just as sharp as the Sigma Trio, and it has all of the focal lengths from 16mm all the way to 55mm in one compact, relatively lightweight lens body. I've already done a review on this lens, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. This is basically going to be kind of like a follow-up review. Anyway, let's just take a look at what this thing is capable of. All of these shots are handheld, taken with this setup, A6100, 16-55G. Most of these I took, a couple of them Janessa took, but this is what this combo can do. Ready, set, go.
Just be careful now.
So the a6100, I think I've already mentioned kind of why I brought it with me and why it's my most used camera body. It's just because it gives you all of the performance of the a6400 and a6600, at least with photographs, and you can get it for like half the price of the a6600. So it's a very, very good value. I don't worry about it as much. That's why I take it with me on trips. Now let's talk about the lens, because this is an expensive lens, and if I were to drop it, break it, lose it, get it stolen from me, I would definitely not be happy. But on this trip in particular, I knew that I needed to take some landscapes, or at least I wanted to take some landscape shots. In most situations, what I would use for a landscape lens is my Sigma 16mm f1.4. Very sharp, great lens. However, I also wanted to take a bunch of portraits of my wife and baby boy, and my favorite portrait lens is the Sigma 56 f1.4, which means I would have had to take at least those two lenses. But then I also started to think, well, if we're walking through some scenic downtown areas, maybe I wanted to take the Sigma 30mm as well. The choice was between taking one lens, the 16-55 f2.8, which has all of those focal lengths in one, or taking three lenses with me and then constantly switching lenses one to the other depending on the type of photograph I wanted to take. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, the 16-55 again takes just as sharp a photo as the Sigma Trio does, but it's more convenient. The autofocus is also a bit faster and more accurate. It's weather sealed. By far the only lens that I think currently in Sony's lineup competes with a very good prime lens, and that's why it's here with me on this trip. I get a lot of DMs asking me, how does this lens compare to something like the 16-70 Zeiss, the 18-105, the 18-135, and ultimately I'll sum up my response here in a few sentences. It doesn't compare. The 16-55 is, in my opinion, like having a bunch of primes in one zoom lens. The other competitors just don't come up to the level of sharpness that you get with this one lens. Those lenses are certainly upgrades over the kit lens, the 16-50, but they are nowhere near the performance of the Sigma Trio, a good sharp prime, whereas this G lens keeps up with any prime, in my opinion, any good prime, even the Sigmas. So that is why it is a lens that I would definitely recommend. It is the no compromise zoom lens. So that is it for my kit. Very simple, very straightforward. If you guys are interested in checking out this camera body, this lens, the SD card, charger, the batteries, whatever it is, I'll just post everything down below, including this bag, if you guys want to replicate any of these things or add them to whatever you are currently using. When I bought this lens last year, I was planning on just reviewing it, possibly putting it up against some other lenses and just selling it off. But I liked it so much that I decided to just keep it for myself. And you might be saying, yeah, it's an expensive lens, what's the point? The way I look at it is kind of an investment. So I buy it for $1,200, I'll use it for a couple of years, take a bunch of amazing photographs with it, and if I decide that I want to sell it and move on to something else, I'll probably recoup a decent amount of my money, 80%, 70% of it. So it won't end up costing me $1,200 to own this lens for a couple of years. Lenses in general tend to keep their value, and especially when you compare it to camera bodies that tend to depreciate a lot more quickly. Lenses, I support spending a little bit more on a good set of lenses to create what I consider once in a lifetime memories, because Lucas is never going to be this age in Vail, Colorado as he is today, taking a nap currently. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. As always, down below, you check out all the links. Thank you guys so much for all of your support, all of your likes and your comments. Let me know what you guys thought of the samples and what you guys think of Colorado, and stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.